What if I told you that you aren't actually keeping fish?
Right.
Like that your real job, the one that actually dictates life and death inside your aquarium, is being the mayor of an invisible city of billions of microscopic bacteria.
It's a wild thought.
It really is. Anyway, welcome to the Tank Guide Life podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so usually when we start one of these conversations, we jump straight into the deep end, right? Like breaking down water chemistry or fluid dynamics or aquatic plant biology.
There we go. We usually go right for the heavy science.
Exactly. But today, we need to take a step back. We're doing something a little different for this deep dive, something a bit more, I don't know, grounded, more reflective.
I think it's a necessary moment to just pause. It is so incredibly easy in this hobby to just keep moving forward.
Oh, totally.
You're constantly testing the water, scrubbing algae, changing out filter media.
Letting mix hardscape, yeah.
Right, and you do all that without ever looking down at the foundation you're actually standing on. So today is entirely about that foundation.
And there is a very specific, very exciting reason we're having this conversation today on Tank Guide Life. We just hit our first 100 subscribers on YouTube.
Which is huge.
It is. Now, I know in the grand scheme of the internet, where people are chasing like millions of views and viral trends, 100 might sound like a rounding error.
Yeah, just a drop in the bucket to some people.
But to us,
Yeah.
it is everything.
Yeah.
Because those 100 people are not just passive scrollers waiting to be entertained. You are the foundational community.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to this right now, I really want to say thank you. You're here early, and that matters.
It matters immensely because the early adopters in any community, they set the culture for everyone who follows.
That's a really good point.
And the people who are here right now, you're the ones who resonate with a very specific, calm, and deliberate approach to fish keeping.
Yeah, you weren't here for those flashy clickbait top 10 fish you must buy videos.
Right, the ones with the shocked face thumbnails.
Ugh, exactly. You are here because you actually want to understand the underlying biology of your aquarium.
You want to learn how to keep animals thriving for years, not just how to set up a pretty glass box for a quick social media photo before it all crashes.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because being early means you're getting in on the ground floor of a vision that we honestly believe is going to fundamentally shift how beginners learn this hobby.
It's a big shift.
It is. So our mission for today's deep dive is to lay all of our cards on the table. We're going to define exactly what Fishkeeping Life Co. is building with the Tank Guide.
We want to reinforce the philosophy that drives every single tool we code, every guide we write.
Yeah, and we're going to showcase the toolbox that already exists for you to use today. And then we'll open up the roadmap and show you exactly where we're heading.
And if we really want to understand where that roadmap is taking us, we have to look honestly at where the aquarium hobby is right now.
Oh, boy.
Frankly, for a beginner stepping into this world, it is an incredibly noisy, contradictory, and just confusing place.
I remember that feeling so vividly. Like, think about it from the perspective of someone who just bought a standard 20-gallon tank for their living room.
A super common starting point.
Right. So they go online to figure out how to set it up, and what do they find? It's a battlefield.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild out there.
Like, one forum tells them they absolutely must do a fishless cycle using pure liquid ammonia, or they're basically an animal abuser.
Right at Purity, please.
Yeah, but then they click on another forum, and some veteran hobbyist tells them that's total nonsense, and they should just, throw in some feeder fish and let them survive the ammonia spike.
Which is terrible advice, by the way.
Awful advice.
Yeah.
And if that beginner dares to ask a clarifying question, they're often met with this intense, impenetrable wall of gatekeeping.
The gatekeeping is, it's perhaps the most toxic element of the current landscape.
It really is.
You have these experienced hobbyists who have completely forgotten what it feels like to be a beginner.
Yeah, they suffer from the curse of knowledge.
Exactly. So they throw around complex jargon talking about KH buffers, redox potential, PAR values.
And they never explain what those things actually do mechanically.
Right. And they judge newcomers for not already knowing the intricacies of the nitrogen cycle.
Which is crazy because no one is born knowing that stuff.
No one. And what happens is that the beginner experiences severe analysis paralysis.
Oh, I've been there. You just freeze.
They become so terrified of making a mistake, so afraid of being mocked on a forum, that the inherent joy of the hobby is completely stripped away.
Which brings us to the exact problem Fishkeeping Life Co. was built to solve. The vision for the tank guide is to be a trusted, no-noise resource.
A safe haven, really.
Yeah, a centralized hub where facts and fish welfare come first, and the ego is just left at the door.
We want to be that clear, calm voice that guides you from confusion to confidence.
But doing that, I mean, it means we have to rethink how information is delivered. We want absolutely no overwhelm and zero misinformation.
This is where the concept of the university section comes into play. We really modeled it after a highly structured study hall approach.
I love the study hall analogy.
Because the fundamental flaw in most aquarium advice is that it tries to teach you everything at once.
Right, like drinking from a fire hose?
Exactly. You don't teach a teenager how to drive by handing them a dense manual on internal combustion engines.
No, you teach them how to steer and brake first.
Right, so when you go to the university section of the site, it explicitly tells you, do not try to learn everything today.
Just pick one topic.
Yeah, pick one topic that matches exactly where you are right now. If you are unboxing a new tank, just focus on water chemistry and the nitrogen cycle.
Read a few articles, test what you learned with your own tap water, and then come back when you're actually ready to learn about, like, lighting or fertilizers.
It's about taking in information in small, digestible sessions, rather than cramming for a final exam.
And crucially, the material in that university section isn't just a collection of our personal opinions.
Oh, definitely not.
We curate peer-reviewed studies and classroom resources from working scientists and aquatic institutions.
Yeah, for instance, we pull from Duke University materials to explain the actual chemical relationships between pH, KH, and GH.
Which is heavy stuff.
It is. We also bring in freshwater aquarium lesson plans from Penn State and biosecurity workflows from the Euphesis Extension Program.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop you there. Because bringing up Duke University studies sounds great on paper, but I can hear the beginner panicking already.
Fair point.
Like, if I'm struggling to keep a neon tetra alive, reading a collegiate-level paper on water chemistry sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It does sound intimidating.
So how do we take that high-level science and actually make it useful for someone standing in their living room with a bucket of sloshing water?
Well, that is the core of the work we do. We don't just copy and paste academic papers, we translate them.
Right.
Let's take KH, or carbonate hardness, as an example. A university paper will explain KH as the measure of dissolved carbonate and bicarbonate ions in the water.
And detail the chemical equations of how they neutralize acid.
Right, which makes your eyes glaze over.
Well,
But we translate that into a functional concept for you. KH is your aquarium's chemical shock absorber.
a shock absorber, I really like that. Break that down for me.
So every day, the fish waste and the biological processes in your filter produce acids.
Natural byproducts of life.
Exactly. If you don't have enough KH in your water, those acids will cause your pH to crash rapidly.
Oh, wow.
And a sudden drop in pH can literally stall your beneficial bacteria, causing ammonia to spike.
Which is deadly.
Very. So we take the complex chemistry of carbonates binding to free hydrogen ions, and we turn it into an actionable step.
Which is test your tap water's KH.
Yes. And if it's too low, we show you how to safely add crushed coral to your filter. The coral slowly dissolves, adding that chemical shock absorber back into the water, keeping your pH stable and your fish safe.
So we take the dense science and extract the practical mechanism. And I need to pull back the curtain for a second here, because when we talk about curating university studies, coding interactive calculators, building this entire toolbox.
It can sound massive.
Yeah, it can sound like there's a huge corporate team and a glass building behind this. I'm only going to mention this once, but it's a vital context for our listeners to understand our philosophy.
Right.
This entire Fishkeeping Life Co-operation is a solo studio. It's a one-person operation being built in the margins of life.
Balancing full-time work, parenting, late-night water changes.
All of it. And that is precisely why the philosophy of the site leans so heavily into realistic, small, winning habits.
Because when you're managing a busy family life, you simply do not have time for a daily 3-hour maintenance routine on your fish tank.
No one has time for that.
You need systems that actually work in the real world. You need to know that spending 5 minutes testing your water parameters consistently is infinitely more valuable than buying $1,000 worth of automated gear.
Gear that you don't even understand how to troubleshoot when the Wi-Fi connection breaks.
Exactly.
So with that reality firmly in mind, let's talk about what we're building towards. What is the future vision for the content itself?
Well, a major shift we're making right now is moving heavily toward showing, not just telling.
Yes.
We're going to be bringing far more documented builds and long-term experiments directly to the community.
Moving away from just theoretical advice.
Right. The anchor for this is going to be our 29-gallon reference tank.
I love that tank.
Me too.
Yeah.
We want to show you the exact parameters, the fertilizer dosing logs, the successes, and the inevitable failures of that specific tank in real time.
So if a specific plant species melts back and dies, we document it.
We don't hide it. If an algae bloom suddenly takes over the glass, we show you exactly the biological steps we take to address it.
It's the ultimate proof of the concepts we teach, but we also want to empower the listener to take control of their own systems, right? Not just copy ours.
Absolutely. That means rolling out more DIY guides.
Like what we're working on right now, the highly detailed guide on how to build a freshwater sump from scratch.
Building a sump perfectly encapsulates our vision. You know, a sump isn't just an expensive piece of gear you buy off a shelf.
No, it's a biological engine that you design.
Right. When we teach someone how to design the internal glass baffles in a sump, we're actually teaching fluid dynamics.
Explain that connection. Because how does gluing a piece of glass into a tank teach fluid dynamics?
Well, if you just dump filter media into a tank, water will always find the path of least resistance.
Right.
It will flow right around your media. It's a concept called channeling.
Which means the water isn't getting filtered.
Exactly. By installing baffles, usually in an over configuration, you are forcing the water to physically push down through your mechanical sponges and up through your biological ceramic rings.
So we teach you how to sequence that media.
Yes. Why the mechanical sponge must come first to catch the physical waste so it doesn't coat and suffocate the living bacteria in the biological media that follows.
You aren't just plugging in a canister filter and hoping for the best.
No, you're gaining a deep mechanical understanding of the biological processes happening behind the glass.
And beyond the DIY physical builds, we are massively expanding the interactive digital tools.
The tools are huge.
Yeah, like
Right.
the stocking advisor is going to be improved to better cover invertebrates. We really want to build out a dedicated snail stocking advisor.
That's so needed because people vastly underestimate the bioload of mystery snails and neorites.
Oh, they poop so much.
They really do. And we're going to expand our aquarium calculators to further replace the guesswork of fish keeping with hard data.
Because the data is what actually protects the animal.
Exactly. When we rely on hard math rather than gut intuition, we prevent overstocking, we prevent incompatible species pairings, and we maintain much safer water quality.
But the vision isn't just calculators and DIY plumbing guides, right? There is a whole narrative and educational side that we're building out.
Specifically centered around the Life in Balance storybook series.
I am so excited about this part.
Life in Balance. The hidden magic of aquariums is a crucial part of our roadmap. The vision there is to drastically expand its narrative reach.
We want to bring more stories that make the science of fish care accessible to the entire family.
Yeah, for instance, exploring the prequel story, the journey of bringing Benny the Betta home from the pet store.
Oh, the Benny the Betta prequel.
Right, walking through the acclimation process and integrating him into a thriving, balanced ecosystem.
It turns the nitrogen cycle from a terrifying, invisible chemistry lesson into an engaging adventure.
It teaches kids, and let's be honest, it teaches adults too, how beneficial bacteria work in a way that actually sticks in their minds.
Definitely. But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
If I am looking at this from a pure business or growth perspective, I have to ask, why spend all this time?
What do you mean?
Like, why spend months coding complex, logic-based calculators and writing illustrated storybooks and translating dense university studies instead of just posting quick top 10 beginner fish lists on TikTok to farm views?
Well, because quick tips often lead to dead fish. It really is that simple.
Wow. Yeah.
A bulleted list might tell you to buy a neon tetra and a gourami, but it won't explain the bioload implications or the water parameter overlap or the nitrogen cycle requirements necessary to keep them alive.
It just tells you to buy them.
Right. Building interactive, logic-based infrastructure like a calculator that actually crunches the numbers on your specific tank volume and filter flow that respects the listener's time.
And much more importantly, it respects the animal's life far more than a 60-second soundbite ever could.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be the loudest voice in the hobby, just one of the most honest.
I love that. And that honesty isn't some abstract future promise, you know? It is hard-coded into the tools and products that are already live and being used by our community today.
The present toolbox is already so robust.
Right. So we talk a big game about using data to prevent dead fish, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Let's get into it.
Because right now, if someone is setting up a tank, They don't want a philosophy lecture. They need a tool to tell them if they are making a catastrophic mistake. Let's unpack the present toolbox. Let's start with the crown jewel of the tank guide, the stocking advisor.
Ah, the stocking advisor. This is our direct mathematical answer to the most outdated, frustrating piece of advice in the entire hobby. The 1 inch per gallon rule.
Oh, I despise that rule so much.
It's the worst.
It makes no sense mechanically, biologically, or logically.
It makes absolutely no biological sense. The inch per gallon rule assumes that a 1 inch neon tetra produces the exact same amount of ammonia and has the exact same oxygen demand as a 1 inch juvenile cichlid.
Which is ridiculous.
It completely ignores activity levels, body mass, metabolic rates, and behavioral territory.
Wait, let me push back here, though. I completely agree the inch per gallon rule is flawed.
Right.
But how can a calculator possibly know the difference between a high-waist cichlid and a low-waist tetra if they are the exact same size? What is the actual math happening under the hood of the stocking advisor?
Well, that is where the logic engine comes in. When you open the stocking advisor, you don't just type in a list of fish.
You start with the tank.
Exactly. You start by selecting your tank size, which sets your baseline water volume. Then, crucially, you select your specific filter product, or you manually input your filter's exact gallons per hour, the GPH.
Oh, right, because a 20-gallon tank with a tiny sponge filter in the corner has a vastly different waste processing capacity than a 20-gallon tank running a massive external canister filter.
Precisely. Then, as you add your current and planned fish to the list, the tool calculates the actual bioload using what we call activity and metabolic multipliers.
Activity multipliers, I like that.
Yeah. Fast, active swimmers like zebra danios have a much higher metabolic rate. They consume more oxygen and produce more waste per gram of body weight than a slow cruiser like a gourami.
So the calculator assigns a higher load to the danio even if they are the same length.
Exactly. It factors in their feeding response, their mass, and their oxygen demand.
That makes so much more sense than just measuring fish with a ruler.
It really does. But it isn't just about waste processing. It's about chemistry and behavior too.
Yeah, because as you build your list, the environmental recommendations card dynamically updates to show you the overlapping temperature, pH, and hardness preferences of your selected fish.
Right, so if you try to mix a discus that needs 82-degree acidic water with a goldfish that needs 65-degree alkaline water, the tool flags it immediately.
It also generates behavioral compatibility alerts. It has a built-in conservative model that warns you about known problem pairs.
Like trying to put a known fin nipper like a tiger barb in with a long-finned betta.
Or a shrimp-hunting predator in with your delicate cherry shrimp. It throws up a warning so you can fix the issue before any animals are actually purchased and placed in the water.
It takes all the spreadsheets and anxious guesswork out of the planning phase.
And once you have your stocking perfectly planned, you move over to the second heavy lifter in the toolbox, the cycling coach.
The cycling coach is amazing because it tackles the single biggest hurdle for any new aquarist, mastering the nitrogen cycle.
Yeah, we know that the nitrogen cycle is this natural 4 to 8 week biological process where beneficial bacteria establish themselves to convert highly toxic ammonia into nitrate and then into less toxic nitrate.
But tracking that invisible process using raw liquid test tubes can feel like navigating a maze blindfolded.
Because the test kit just gives you a color, right? Like light green, dark green, purple.
Yeah, and you're holding it up to the light, squinting, trying to guess the shade.
Yeah.
The cycling coach turns those raw, confusing liquid test measurements into clear, actionable guidance.
You just log your daily readings for ammonia, nitrate, pH, and temperature. You select whether you are doing a fishless cycle or a fish-in cycle, and the tool evaluates your progress mathematically.
And what's truly fascinating here is the underlying chemistry the tool is actually running. The cycling coach utilizes the Emerson Formula.
The Emerson Formula. I've seen that term used, but what does it actually do?
So when you use a standard liquid test pit to measure ammonia, it measures total ammonia nitrogen. But ammonia in water exists in two different forms. There's ionized ammonia, known as NH4 plus E, which is relatively harmless. And then there's unionized ammonia, NH3, which is highly toxic to fish.
And the balance between those two forms shifts constantly, right?
Exactly, based on your water's pH and temperature. The Emerson Formula takes your pH, temperature, and total ammonia readings to calculate the specific concentration of the highly toxic NH3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if your values approach the EPA aquatic life criteria thresholds for toxicity, the tool immediately alerts you to pause your stocking plans.
It might tell you to do an emergency water change or increase surface aeration.
Right. It tells you exactly what your data actually means.
So if you have an ammonia spike, it might suggest waiting 24 to 48 hours for the nitrosomonas bacteria to catch up.
Or if your cycle stalls completely, it might remind you to check your heater because nitrifying bacteria slow down their reproduction drastically in cold water.
That is so cool, but the absolute best part of the cycling coach is how it ends.
Yes, the 24-hour challenge.
It doesn't just give you a thumbs up and say, you're probably done. It requires this definitive test.
The 24-hour challenge is the ultimate proof that your biological filter is robustly established. For a fishless cycle, the tool requires you to intentionally dose the tank to exactly 2 parts per million of ammonia.
And then you wait precisely 24 hours.
Right. And if, after 24 hours, your test results show 0 ammonia, 0 nitrate, and a measurable rise in nitrates, you have definitively proven that your bacterial colony can handle a heavy bioload.
Only then is the tank considered biologically safe for fish?
It completely removes all the ambiguity.
So we have the stocking advisor to mathematically plan the fish and the cycling coach to chemically prepare the water. What about the actual equipment?
That is where the gear guide comes in.
The gear guide is so needed because it strips away all the marketing hype that plagues aquarium equipment.
Oh, the hype is real. When a beginner walks into a big box cat store, they're just overwhelmed by glossy boxes claiming to be the most powerful filter or the ultimate plant light.
The gear guide ignores all that marketing and matches equipment to tank size logically.
We break it down by category. Nano tanks, 20-gallon beginner favorites, all the way up to 75-gallon big displays.
And we focus entirely on what actually supports biological processes. We aren't recommending a filter because it has a sleek black plastic housing.
No, we recommend it because it provides a massive amount of internal surface area for beneficial bacteria to colonize.
We answer the actual questions beginners have. What size heater do I actually need? The guide tells you the baseline is 5 watts per gallon.
How much filtration flow is enough? Aim for 5 to 7 times the tank volume per hour in turnover.
And it directly addresses the myths, too.
Right, like people often ask on forums if they can have too much filtration.
The gear guide clarifies the difference between biological capacity and flow rate.
Which is huge. You can definitely have too much flow, which exhausts and stresses out slow-moving fish like betas.
But you can rarely have too much biological capacity.
Exactly. It teaches you how to use baffles or spray bars to disperse the flow, keeping the water physically calm while maintaining massive chemical filtration power.
And rounding out the digital side of things is the learning and university section we touched on earlier. This is where we make real science accessible.
We don't just tell you to keep your water clean.
We explain the literal mechanical difference between mechanical filtration, which acts like a physical sieve catching old leaves and fish waste, and biological filtration, which is the living colony of bacteria processing the invisible toxins.
It creates a complete loop of understanding. You read the theory in the university section, you use the gear guide to buy the right tools based on that theory.
You use the cycling coach to establish the biology safely, and you use the stocking advisor to safely add the animals. It's a full ecosystem.
But the toolbox isn't purely digital. We also have physical products.
Yes, and I have to explicitly note here, we made these because we wanted them. We built the physical tools we desperately wished we had when we were starting out. Let's talk about the Daily Tank Journal.
The Daily Tank Journal takes the digital concept of tracking data and brings it into the physical, screen-free world.
There is an immense, almost tactile value in physically writing down your parameters.
It builds physical muscle memory and enforces a routine.
And we break it down into 2 distinct versions. The standard version is perfect for your typical community tank, giving you structured space to track temperature, pH, ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, water change schedules, and feeding habits.
But then we have the planted edition.
Oh man, the Planet Edition is a different beast entirely.
If you are running a high-tech aquascape, you have a lot more variables to manage. The Planted Edition adds dedicated tracking grids for CO2 dosing, lighting PAR schedules, specific macro and micronutrient fertilizer regimens, and plant growth observations.
It is an absolute necessity for anyone trying to balance that highly complex triangle of intense light, injected CO2, and liquid nutrients.
Right, because if you mess that up, you accidentally trigger a massive algae outbreak.
Alongside the journals, we have the coloring books, volumes 1 and 2, and the flagship Life in Balance handbook.
And these aren't just novelty items to keep kids busy.
No, they are screen-free educational tools. The coloring books literally teach the nitrogen cycle and ecosystem balance while you are engaging with the artwork.
You're learning the anatomy of a betta, or the function of aquatic plant roots through active engagement.
It's about changing the context of learning. Sitting down and reading a textbook on water chemistry is intimidating.
But coloring a detailed diagram of how fish waste breaks down into nitrogen gas or plant food, that's intuitive, relaxing, and highly memorable.
Which brings us perfectly to the podcast approach. Why do we prioritize these long-form conversations? Why take 60 minutes to talk about this stuff instead of making a snappy 60-second TikTok video with trending music?
Because the biological concepts that dictate life and death in an aquarium simply cannot be accurately conveyed in 60 seconds.
They just can't.
When you compress information that tightly, you lose all the nuance and you completely lose the why.
Yeah, in a short soundbite, I can tell you to cycle your tank, but I can't explain why unionized ammonia chemically burns fish gills.
Or how a bacterial colony physically colonizes the microscopic pores of a sponge filter. Ideas need to be explored and unpacked.
They need to be given space to breathe, not shut down by ego or the need for a quick punchline.
In this podcast, we have the time to cover the key topics that actually form the foundation of the hobby.
For instance, we can dive deep into plants and substrates. We can discuss how choosing between a low-tech setup with easy plants like Java fern versus a high-tech setup with CO2 injection completely alters the chemical reality of your tank.
We can actually take the time to discuss the enzyme rubisco, which aquatic plants use to capture carbon.
I love talking about rubisco.
It's so cool. In a low-tech tank, plants rely on the tiny amounts of CO2 naturally dissolved in the water, so they grow slowly.
But in a high-tech tank, you are injecting extra CO2, supercharging that enzyme.
Which means the plants grow incredibly fast, but it also means they will rapidly strip the water of nutrients if you aren't logging your fertilizers correctly.
We can also spend time explaining that substrates aren't just decorative dirt or colored gravel to make the bottom look nice.
Right. Substrates are massive biological filters.
We can talk about cation exchange capacity in active soils.
Exactly. Active soil substrates literally grab onto positively charged nutrient ions like ammonium and potassium, pulling them out of the water column and holding them near the roots where the plants can absorb them.
It buffers your pH naturally.
And even plain inert gravel provides millions of microscopic surfaces for nitrifying bacteria to live on. The substrate is the literal foundation of the tank's health, both physically and chemically.
We also have the space to unpack aquascaping and ecosystems. Aquascaping isn't just underwater interior design where you stack some rocks.
No, it is about designing living structures. It's using submerged plants, floating plants to provide shade and security, and emergent plants like pothos.
Pothos is a fantastic example.
It really is. When you grow an emergent plant like pothos with its roots in the tank water and its leaves in the open air, it has access to unlimited atmospheric CO2.
Because it isn't limited by dissolved CO2 like underwater plants, it grows massively fast.
And as it grows, it rapidly consumes nitrates from the water. It is a biological filtration powerhouse.
And crucially, having a long-form conversation lets us talk about the hard realities, like plant melt.
Plant melt is so misunderstood.
Beginners buy beautiful plants from the store, put them in their tank, and 2 weeks later, those plants are turning into transparent mush. If they don't understand the biology of plant melt, they will panic and throw the plant away.
Which is a tragedy, because plant melt is completely natural.
Most aquatic plants sold in stores, like cryptocorynes, are grown emerged out of the water in massive humid greenhouses.
Terrestrial leaves have a thick, waxy cuticle to prevent them from drying out. When you submerge that plant in your tank, those thick leaves can't exchange gases effectively underwater.
So the plant initiates apoptosis, cellular death.
It digests its own terrestrial leaves to reclaim the energy and uses that energy to grow thin, delicate aquatic leaves that can absorb dissolved gases.
And it's the same thing when you're dealing with something like a tiger lotus bulb.
Oh, the tiger lotus is a perfect example of why you need to understand the biology.
Right, because people buy this bulb, drop it in, and sometimes nothing happens for weeks or the first few leaves melt away. But if you have the right substrate and give it time, it explodes with these massive, stunning red leaves.
It's all about patience and understanding the plant cycle.
It's basically a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. It looks like it's dying, but it's actually metamorphosing. In a long-form discussion, we can prepare listeners for that reality.
We could also explain the absolute necessity of mastering the nitrogen cycle to prevent new tank syndrome.
Oh, that terrifying moment when you add too many fish to an uncycled tank, the unseen ammonia spikes, the water goes cloudy with a massive bacterial bloom, and your fish are gasping at the surface.
We can talk about the exact biological steps to prevent that nightmare scenario entirely.
If we connect all this to the bigger picture, all of these tools, the podcast conversations, the calculators, the journals, the deep dives into plant biology, they all serve a singular purpose.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
I like to think of using these tools and products as having a co-pilot. If you are flying a plane or running an aquarium, you still have to do the physical work. You have to look at the instruments, you observe your tank, you prune the plants, you do the water changes.
Right.
But with the Tank Guide Toolbox, you no longer have to navigate the complex chemistry blindfolded. You have a co-pilot running the math, checking the species compatibility, and tracking the chemical data right next to you.
That is the perfect way to look at it. We provide the highly detailed navigational charts, but you are still the one flying the plane.
And the reason we provide a co-pilot, rather than trying to sell you some magic fix-it-all chemical autopilot in a bottle, is rooted deeply in our core values as aquarists.
Which brings us to the underlying philosophy.
The reason we want you engaged, the reason we push you to learn the science rather than just buy a quick fix, is based on a very specific set of beliefs.
The philosophy that holds the entire Fishkeeping Life Co. operation together. And the very first pillar of that philosophy is facts over ego.
This loops right back to what we were saying about the toxic dynamics found in so many online forums, the expert versus beginner battleground.
It is incredibly damaging to the hobby. You have beginners who ask a simple, honest question. Maybe they ask if they can keep a goldfish in a 1-gallon bowl.
Because honestly, that is what decades of pop culture and cartoons have taught them is acceptable.
Exactly. And instead of being met with education, they are met with mockery, condescension, and insults.
And the thing is, beginners aren't ignorant, they are just beginning. No one is born knowing the molecular structure of ammonia or the territorial bottom-dwelling habits of a bristlenose pleco.
We all had to learn it from scratch.
The site, the podcast, the tools, they all exist to provide pure facts without that condescension.
We give you the data on why a goldfish produces massive amounts of waste and needs a large tank and heavy filtration, without making you feel stupid for asking the question in the first place.
Because when human ego gets involved, the focus completely shifts from the health of the animal to the perceived superiority of the keeper.
Which violates our second and arguably most important philosophical pillar, fish welfare first.
Let's discuss what that really means in practice, because every single person online says they care about the fish.
But practicing fish welfare first means making hard, sometimes disappointing choices. It means accepting that a visually stunning, meticulously designed, award-winning aquascape is completely irrelevant and honestly a failure if the animals inside it are stressed, sick, or dying.
It dictates every single line of code in our tools. It is the reason we prioritize highly conservative bioload estimates in the stocking advisor.
We intentionally calculate the waste output on the higher end of the spectrum because we would rather tell you that your tank is full a few fish early than tell you it's fine and watch your system crash from an ammonia spike 2 weeks later.
It's why we have such strict compatibility warnings. You might really want to put an aggressive cichlid in with your peaceful schooling tetras because you like the color contrast.
But the life of the fish supersedes the aesthetic desires of the keeper. When fish are constantly chased by an incompatible tank mate, their bodies flood with the stress hormone cortisol.
And chronic cortisol exposure in fish literally shuts down their immune system.
It stops their bodies from producing white blood cells, making them incredibly susceptible to common pathogens like Ichthys or Calamaris that are always present in the water.
The tool will warn you against that pairing because physiological welfare comes before visual appeal every single time.
And our third pillar is the absolute commitment to transparency. We call it learn out loud, or the embracing of trial and error.
This is where we have to be vulnerable. Because to teach effectively, we have to admit that we don't have magical, perfect tanks where nothing ever goes wrong.
We share real, raw examples from our own history. We document the failures right alongside the successes.
For instance, we have fully published the logs detailing our failed shrimp fishless cycle experiment.
Oh, that was a tough one.
We wanted to see if a certain accelerated method would prepare a tank for sensitive neocaridina shrimp faster, and it failed spectacularly. The parameters spiked, the biological cycle completely crashed.
We documented exactly what went wrong chemically and published it so our readers wouldn't make the same expensive, frustrating mistake.
Or the incredibly hard lesson of losing Harlequin rasboris to a fission cycle early in our journey.
That is a deeply painful thing to admit as someone who runs an educational platform. You bought these animals, They are your direct responsibility, and due to a lack of understanding or a rush process, they died.
But we share that story. We unpack the exact mechanics of what happened.
We explain how the unionized ammonia literally burned the delicate lamellae in their gills, preventing oxygen diffusion and causing them to suffocate.
Hiding our mistakes serves no one. We share the pain of that loss and the science behind it, so the listener never has to repeat it.
This raises an important point about the nature of the hobby itself. An aquarium is not a static piece of furniture. It is a living, breathing, constantly shifting science experiment.
Embracing trial and error with small, consistent habits is the true mark of a master fish keeper. You are constantly observing, tweaking, measuring, and learning.
99 things might not work, but one might change everything.
You might try 10 different lighting schedules, 5 different liquid fertilizers, and move your filter output nozzle 3 different times, and suddenly the algae clears up, the water turns crystal clear, and the plants explode with new growth.
That one mechanical change makes all the previous failures worth it.
Reflecting on that learn out loud philosophy, it is the only way to genuinely advance your understanding. When you track your data in your daily tank journal, when you use the cycling coach to monitor your parameters over weeks, you are gathering the empirical data of your own personal science experiment.
You are learning the unique chemical language your specific tank speaks.
And by embracing that trial and error, by meticulously documenting the failures and the eventual successes in our 29-gallon reference tank, we discover highly practical, tested solutions to the hobby's most frustrating problems, which is exactly what we are rolling out next.
Which brings us perfectly to the roadmap, the near future of the tank guide.
We are taking all of this underlying philosophy, all of these mathematical tools, and we are aiming them directly at tackling real-world, everyday problems. And there's perhaps no problem more frustrating, more rage-inducing in the freshwater planted tank hobby than blackbeard algae, or BBA.
BBA is a total nightmare for many aquarists. It's this dark, fuzzy, incredibly stubborn brush algae that physically attaches itself to plant leaves, driftwood, and filter intakes.
It ruins the aesthetic of the tank, and more importantly, it physically chokes out the plants by blocking their access to light.
And the advice online is usually a chaotic mix of panic, bleach dips, and extreme chemical warfare.
So we are releasing a comprehensive, biologically grounded blackbeard algae guide, and we are giving you a preview of it right now.
This isn't theoretical forum advice. This is the exact step-by-step spot dosing routine that we use to beat BBA safely in our own tanks.
The guide breaks down the specific chemistry of what is happening. It isn't just pour in some random algicide.
We detail the method of spot dosing Sechem XL, which is fundamentally a glutaraldehyde solution using a syringe or pipette directly onto the BBA patches.
But crucially, the guide emphasizes the fluid dynamics. The absolute necessity of turning off your filters and circulation pumps during the treatment.
This is so important.
Hold on, I need to visualize this. Why do I have to turn off the filter? Doesn't the tank need flow?
If the pumps are running, the glutaraldehyde just blows away into the water column, becoming too diluted to be effective.
Oh, that makes sense.
You have to turn off the flow so the liquid sits directly, heavily concentrated on the algae for 10 to 15 minutes.
And what does it actually do to the algae?
Glutaraldehyde works by literally cross-linking the proteins within the algae cells. It binds their amino groups together, essentially freezing their cellular machinery in place so the algae cannot function or reproduce.
It chemically burns the BBA.
And we tell you exactly what to expect. You dose it, and over the next 2 to 3 days, the BBA will turn bright red or pink as the cells die, then it will shrivel up, and finally release from the surface so your mechanical filter can catch it or your cleanup crew can eat it.
It's precise surgical chemical intervention, but treating the symptom isn't enough, right? The guide also tackles fixing the environmental factors that cause the BBA to bloom in the first place.
We dive into adjusting your lighting timers and understanding the spectrum.
We explain how optimizing your flow eliminates dead spots where organic waste accumulates. And we reiterate the absolute necessity of pruning plant melt early.
Yes. Plant melt is basically rotting organic matter, which releases massive amounts of dissolved organics into the water, an all-you-can-eat buffet for BBA spores. You have to cut the dying leaves out.
And we discuss the target of managing steady nitrate levels, keeping them in that sweet spot of 5 to 15 ppm.
Many beginners try to get their nitrates to absolute zero, not realizing that zero nitrates literally starves their aquatic plants, causing them to stop growing, which then allows algae to completely take over.
This level of detailed, step-by-step biological problem solving is exactly what we are bringing to the expanded content library. We are massively teasing the growth of the Media Hub.
We're going to take more of those dense university-level articles and transform them into highly accessible step-by-step videos and practical, readable blogs.
It is going to be a much stronger ecosystem focus. We are moving beyond just how to keep a single fish alive to how to balance a complete ecosystem.
We have upcoming deep dives into some perfugium tweaks, how to use a separate glass chamber in your filtration to grow macroalgae or emergent plants to naturally filter out those nitrates.
We want you viewing the tank not as a box of water with a plastic filter hung on the back, but as a complete, biologically balanced, self-sustaining world.
And we will continue to pull back the curtain on the 29-gallon reference tank. We're going to show you the exact parameters, the daily maintenance logs, the successes, and the failures in real time.
You will see exactly how we apply the BBA spot dosing, how we manage the flow in the subperfugium, and how the biological load shifts dynamically as the plants mature and consume more nutrients.
And of course, continued YouTube growth. Reaching 100 subscribers is an amazing milestone, but it is just the beginning. Our goal is to grow the channel by continuing to produce these grounded, hype-free, highly educational conversations.
But I have to ask a question that I know some of our pure beginners listening right now might be thinking. How do we add all this highly advanced content like complex sump fluid dynamics, glutaraldehyde cross-linking, and refugium nutrient creeks without completely alienating the beginners we explicitly promised to protect from overwhelm?
That is the crucial balancing act of education. And we achieve it by maintaining our strict no gatekeeping and human-sized science filters. Every single advanced topic we introduce will be firmly grounded in the basic principles of water chemistry and fish welfare.
So if we talk about sump refugiums, we don't just throw out a bunch of flow rate equations, mention redox potential, and arrogantly assume you know what we mean.
We tie it right back to the basic nitrogen cycle. We explain that a refugium is simply a natural way to remove the end product nitrates that the bacteria in your mechanical filter produced from the ammonia.
Exactly. We ensure the ladder of learning is never pulled up behind us. The university section will always be there for someone to start at the very bottom rung with the basics of pH.
The stocking advisor will always be there to protect the first-time planner from making a fatal mistake. The advanced content is simply the next step on the journey, and we will always provide the bridge to get you there.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We summarized the journey of our mission. We started by defining the vision of a trusted, no-noise educational hub. We laid out the powerful toolbox at your disposal today, the stocking advisor logic, the cycling coach chemistry, the gear guide, the physical journals, the coloring books.
We unpacked the philosophy that holds it all together. Facts over ego, fish welfare first, and learning out loud through our failures.
And we looked at the exciting roadmap ahead with BBA spot dosing guides, Media Hub expansions, and deep ecosystem breakdowns.
It is an ambitious roadmap, but it is built on a solid foundation of real, peer-reviewed science and genuine, unwavering care for the animals and the hobbyists themselves.
So as we wrap up, I want to calmly invite you to fully join this growing community. If you haven't already, please subscribe on YouTube, follow the podcast on your favorite audio platform.
And if you know a friend who is struggling with their own tank, maybe they're battling a stubborn algae bloom or just completely confused by the colors on their water testing kit, share this deep dive with them. Share the tools on the tank guide.
Knowledge is most valuable when it is shared and practically applied. We want to build an environment where everyone can succeed without fear of judgment. If this approach makes sense to you, you're exactly who we're building this for.
Absolutely.
And before we go, I want to leave you with one final concept to mull over on your own as you look at your tank tonight. It builds on everything we've talked about regarding filtration and the nitrogen cycle, but it requires a massive shift in perspective.
A shift away from the fish themselves.
Consider the unseen microscopic world in your tank. Every single surface, from the porous ceramic rings hidden inside your filter, to the blue sponge, to the gravel at the bottom, even the glass itself, is a sprawling, living city of beneficial bacteria.
There are billions of them, working tirelessly, continuously oxidizing toxic ammonia and stabilizing the water chemistry.
In reality, your primary job as an aquarist isn't keeping fish at all. It is keeping that invisible bacteria healthy, fed, and oxygenated. The fish The fish are just the beautiful, colorful byproduct of that invisible success. Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.